In May 2009, the body of 30-year-old Sophie Mercer was discovered in her apartment in Palo Alto, California. An investigation revealed the shocking history of her relationship with Alan Calloway, a married tech CEO. In April 2007, at Vanguard Innovations headquarters on El Camino Real, a series of events began that would ultimately spiral into betrayal, obsession, and murder. The story begins in April 2007, in the heart of Palo Alto, California. Alan Calloway, 45, is at the pinnacle of his career. As the CEO of Vanguard Innovations, he has turned his tech company into a household name, revolutionizing how businesses and individuals store data. Known for his charm and strategic brilliance, Alan's life appears flawless to outsiders. He lives in an upscale suburban mansion with his wife, Elena, and their two teenage children, Lauren, 17, and Ben, 15. His public image as a loving husband, dedicated father, and innovative leader has earned him admiration in Silicon Valley. But beneath the surface, Alan's life is far from perfect. Years of relentless work have left little time for his family, creating emotional distance. Elena, a former marketing executive who sacrificed her career for the family, has begun to feel isolated. Once a vibrant and driven woman, she now spends her days managing their home, attending charity events, and trying to connect with Alan, who seems increasingly distracted. She senses something is wrong but can't quite put her finger on it. Alan, meanwhile, finds himself drawn to Sophie Mercer, his 30-year-old secretary. Sophie grew up in a small Midwestern town, dreaming of escaping the mundane life she saw around her. She worked hard, earning a business degree and eventually landing a position at Vanguard Innovations. Ambitious and sharp, she quickly became indispensable to Alan. But behind her professional demeanor lies a woman deeply insecure about her place in the world. Sophie's relationships are transactional, and her ambition often blinds her to the consequences of her actions. Her affair with Alan began as a calculated move, but it quickly became her obsession. In early May 2007, Sophie's growing frustrations boil over. She feels undervalued at work and begins to see Alan as her ticket to success. She gathers explicit photos of their affair, taken during their clandestine meetings in high-end hotels and conference trips. Sophie arranges a meeting with Alan in his corner office, perched on the 17th floor of Vanguard's sleek glass headquarters. The confrontation is calculated. Sophie, dressed in a sharp black suit, exudes confidence, but her trembling hands betray her anxiety. Alan initially tries to brush her off, but as Sophie lays out her demands, a promotion to vice president of marketing and a significant salary increase, his composure begins to falter. She places a folder containing the photos on his desk, her silence heavy with implied threats. Alan's mind races. The implications are devastating. If these photos were to leak, they wouldn't just destroy his marriage. They could bring down his company. His reputation, carefully built over decades, would be ruined. Sophie watches him closely, knowing she has the upper hand. Later that evening, Alan retreats to his home office, the weight of Sophie's threats bearing down on him. As he tries to think of a way out, his phone buzzes with an anonymous email. The message contains one of the explicit photos and a single line. "This is only the beginning." Alan's heart sinks. This isn't just Sophie's doing. Someone else is involved. The realization leaves him panicked. He begins to question everyone around him. Who else knows? Is it someone in the company? A journalist? He spends the rest of the night pacing, unable to sleep. By June 2007, Sophie's demands have grown more audacious. She begins taking liberties at work, acting as though her promotion is inevitable. She flaunts her connection to Alan, subtly undermining his authority in meetings. Alan becomes increasingly paranoid. He avoids Sophie whenever possible, but she always finds ways to corner him, reminding him of her power over him. At home, Elena notices the changes in Alan. He's more withdrawn, snapping at her and the children over minor issues. She finds him staring blankly at his phone late at night or leaving the house without explanation. Elena, once patient and understanding, starts to feel the cracks in their marriage deepen. She begins to piece together fragments of the truth. A misplaced hotel receipt here. A late-night phone call there. Though she doesn't have concrete evidence, her instincts tell her Alan is hiding something. Meanwhile, Sophie's behavior becomes more erratic. Her obsession with Alan intensifies, and she begins to view Elena as an obstacle. Sophie's own life starts to unravel. Jenna Wallace, her roommate, notices Sophie's late nights and increasingly erratic moods, but doesn't push for details. Sophie keeps her secrets tightly guarded, isolating herself further. In July 2007, Vanguard Innovations hosts its annual gala, a glittering event attended by Silicon Valley's elite. Alan dreads the evening, knowing Sophie will be there. True to form, Sophie ensures she's the center of attention, wearing a stunning red gown and staying close to Alan throughout the night. Her behavior is bold, almost reckless, as she deliberately engages him in whispered conversations, her hand brushing his arm. Alan's attempts to distance himself only seem to embolden her. Elena, observing from across the room, sees the exchange. Though subtle, the interaction confirms her worst fears. She watches as Sophie leans in too closely, laughs too brightly at Alan's strained attempts at conversation. Elena's chest tightens, anger and betrayal boiling beneath her composed exterior. She doesn't confront Alan at the gala, but files the moment away, knowing she'll address it later. That night, after the event, Elena waits for Alan in their expansive kitchen, the house silent, except for the ticking of the wall clock. When he walks in, she doesn't speak immediately, letting the tension build. The confrontation is explosive. Elena's voice shakes as she demands the truth, while Alan deflects, his guilt evident in his avoidance of her gaze. The argument escalates, with Alan finally storming out, slamming the door behind him. Elena is left alone, her anger replaced by a deep, aching sadness. Alan drives aimlessly through the streets of Palo Alto, the weight of his double life pressing down on him. He knows the walls are closing in, but feels powerless to stop it. As he parks in an empty lot, staring blankly at the dashboard, his phone buzzes again. Another anonymous message appears. "Tick-tock, Alan. Time is running out." The message confirms his growing fear. This isn't just about Sophie. Someone else is pulling the strings, and their game is far from over. The morning of May 15th. 2009, began like any other in Sophie Mercer's quiet apartment complex in Palo Alto. The sun rose early, casting golden light through the tall windows of the modern building. Neighbors heard the usual morning sounds, the hum of coffee machines, doors creaking open, and the distant echo of a radio. However, by 10 a.m., an eerie silence enveloped Sophie's unit. It was her landlord checking on a missed rent payment, who stumbled upon the horrifying scene. Sophie lay lifeless in the center of her small living room. Her throat was viciously slit, and deep crimson blood pooled beneath her, staining the beige carpet. Shattered glass from an overturned table surrounded her body, and several of her decorative items lay smashed on the floor. The television flickered with a static screen, its broken antenna bent at an odd angle. The apartment reeked of iron and desperation. Detective Marcus Hart was called to the scene by 11:30 a.m. A seasoned investigator with over a decade of experience, Marcus was known for his calm demeanor even in the face of brutal crimes. As he entered the apartment, his practiced eye scanned the room. Something about the scene didn't sit right. The struggle appeared chaotic, yet oddly purposeful, as if someone had tried too hard to make it look like a robbery gone wrong. Sophie's purse, conspicuously placed near the door, had been emptied, but her wallet and credit cards were untouched. By 3 p.m., the forensic team found traces of DNA under Sophie's fingernails. The samples, when processed, revealed a match: Alan Calloway. Alan's presence in Sophie's apartment wasn't entirely shocking, given their history, but the circumstances now painted him as more than a former lover. Surveillance footage from a neighboring building confirmed Alan's car had been parked near Sophie's apartment at 11:45 p.m. the night before. Detective Hart pieced together the initial facts of the case with meticulous care. Sophie's neighbors reported hearing a muffled argument late in the night, followed by what sounded like glass shattering. No one called the police at the time, assuming it was a minor domestic dispute. A neighbor on the third floor recalled seeing a tall man in a dark coat leaving Sophie's apartment around midnight, but they couldn't confirm his identity. By the evening of May 15th, Alan Calloway was brought in for questioning. He arrived at the station looking pale, dressed in a disheveled business suit. His usual composed demeanor was replaced by an unease that Marcus immediately picked up on. When asked about the DNA under Sophie's nails and his presence near her apartment, Alan struggled to provide clear answers. He claimed he had driven by Sophie's place out of concern after receiving an anonymous email earlier that day, but insisted he never entered. Marcus noted the inconsistencies in Alan's story and the subtle way his hands trembled when pressed further. By May 17th, 2009, the case had taken on a life of its own. Sophie Mercer's murder dominated local headlines, and whispers about her relationship with Alan Calloway spread rapidly through Vanguard Innovations. While Alan remained the primary suspect, Detective Hart's instincts told him there was more to the story. The first major breakthrough came from Jenna Wallace, Sophie's roommate. When questioned on May 18th, Jenna revealed unsettling details about Sophie's final weeks. Sophie had become increasingly paranoid, often double-checking the locks on their doors and glancing over her shoulder when walking home. Jenna recalled Sophie mentioning that someone had been sending her threatening emails, warning her to stay in her lane. Sophie had never disclosed who she thought the sender was, but her fear was palpable. Jenna admitted that Sophie's erratic behavior had created tension between them, leaving Jenna feeling both concerned and frustrated. By May 20th, 2009, Detective Hart's team uncovered a secret financial account tied to Elena Calloway. Transactions revealed large sums of money being withdrawn in cash over the past 3 months, with the last withdrawal made on May 14th, the night before Sophie's murder. The total amount withdrawn exceeded $50,000, a sum that raised immediate suspicions. Elena was brought in for questioning. Elena arrived at the station on May 21st, composed but visibly strained. Her eyes were heavy with exhaustion, and her posture was stiff. During the interrogation, she admitted to having confronted Sophie in person a few days before her death. She described the meeting as an attempt to reason with Sophie and persuade her to end the affair. Elena's tone, while calm, betrayed the depth of her anger and betrayal. She recounted how Sophie had laughed off her pleas, mocking Elena for her powerless position. Elena denied any involvement in Sophie's murder, but couldn't fully explain the large cash withdrawals. She claimed the money was meant to hire a private investigator to gather evidence of Alan's infidelity and Sophie's manipulations. However, the timing of the withdrawals raised questions, and her confession about confronting Sophie added another layer of complexity to the case. Detective Hart began to see a pattern. Sophie had been at the center of a web of deceit, manipulating Alan and antagonizing Elena. The two people closest to Sophie had the strongest motives for her death. Alan's DNA and presence near the crime scene pointed to him, but Elena's financial activity and admission of confrontation painted her as an equally plausible suspect. As Detective Hart delved deeper into the case, the emotional toll on the Calloway family became evident. Elena's carefully maintained composure began to crack under the weight of public scrutiny. She withdrew from social events, avoiding the judgmental stares of their affluent Palo Alto neighbors. Lauren and Ben, the Calloway children, were caught in the crossfire, grappling with the implications of their parents' actions. Both teenagers struggled with the growing whispers about their father's affair and their mother's potential involvement in Sophie's death. Meanwhile, Alan found himself isolated. Once the face of Vanguard Innovations, he was now a man whose every move was under a microscope. His colleagues distanced themselves, and his board of directors began questioning his leadership. Alan spent long nights replaying the events leading up to Sophie's murder, his mind consumed with guilt, fear, and confusion. By May 25th, 2009, the case was at a crossroads. Detective Hart knew the next breakthrough could implicate either Alan or Elena, or reveal an entirely new suspect. The puzzle pieces were beginning to fit together, but the picture they painted was far more complex than anyone had anticipated. By July 2009, the murder trial of Alan Calloway became the most sensational legal event Silicon Valley had seen in years. The courtroom was packed daily, with reporters, curious locals, and legal experts watching closely. Alan, now visibly gaunt and worn, sat at the defense table, flanked by his high-profile attorney, Robert Lang. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Margaret Nielsen, presented a damning narrative. Allen killed Sophie Mercer to protect his career, reputation, and crumbling personal life. The prosecution's case was built on circumstantial evidence that painted a picture of a desperate man. They emphasized Allen's presence near Sophie's apartment on the night of the murder and the traces of his DNA found under her fingernails. Prosecutors also highlighted Sophie's knowledge of Allen's secrets, arguing that her blackmail and threats drove him to a violent breaking point. Margaret Nielsen's calm, methodical presentation made her argument compelling, though not airtight. Allen's defense team fought back, pointing to the lack of direct evidence. Robert Lang argued that Allen had no history of violence and questioned the validity of the surveillance footage, suggesting it was circumstantial at best. Lang also hinted that others had stronger motives to harm Sophie, subtly pointing toward Elena Calloway without directly implicating her. Allen's team painted him as a victim of Sophie's manipulations, a man trapped by his own mistakes, but not a murderer. While the trial captivated the public, Detective Marcus Hart continued working behind the scenes, unconvinced of Allen's guilt. By August 2009, Hart's persistence paid off when he uncovered a deleted email from Sophie's account. The email, dated May 13, 2009, just 2 days before her murder, was addressed to an unknown recipient and hinted at a deep betrayal. Sophie wrote about having leverage over multiple men and her plans to make things right. Hart traced the recipient of the email to Jenna Wallace, Sophie's roommate. Jenna had been a shadowy figure throughout the investigation, cooperating but never offering much insight. When brought in for questioning again, Jenna initially maintained her innocence, but under pressure, her facade cracked. She confessed that Sophie had been extorting not just Allen, but several men, including another executive at Vanguard Innovations, for money and favors. Jenna revealed the strain Sophie's actions had placed on their friendship. Sophie had become secretive, manipulative, and reckless, putting their once close bond to the test. Jenna admitted that she had discovered Sophie's extortion scheme only weeks before her murder, and their arguments about it had grown increasingly heated. However, Jenna denied having anything to do with Sophie's death, though her admission added a new layer of complexity to the case. The trial reached its peak in September 2009, when Elena Calloway took the stand. Her testimony was anticipated to be one of the trial's most dramatic moments, and it didn't disappoint. Elena, dressed in a muted gray suit, appeared composed yet emotionally distant. The prosecution called her to testify about Allen's behavior on the night of Sophie's murder, hoping her account would solidify their timeline. Elena began by recounting the events of May 14, 2009, the night Allen stormed out of their home after a heated argument. She described his erratic behavior, the tension in their marriage, and her growing suspicions about his infidelity. Her calm tone shifted as she revealed a startling claim. She had witnessed Allen leaving Sophie's apartment late that night. The courtroom erupted. The jurors leaned forward, reporters scribbled furiously, and Allen's defense team exchanged anxious glances. Elena's statement seemed to confirm Allen's presence at the crime scene, but the defense quickly seized on inconsistencies in her account. During cross-examination, cracks in Elena's narrative began to show. She struggled to recall specific details, and her timeline of events didn't align perfectly with other evidence. The defense suggested that Elena's anger and betrayal clouded her judgment, casting doubt on her testimony. Detective Hart's investigation reached a dramatic conclusion in late September 2009 when he reviewed surveillance footage from a parking lot near Sophie's apartment. The footage, enhanced and analyzed by forensic experts, revealed a figure leaving the building just after 12:15 a.m. on the night of the murder. The person wasn't Alan, but Jenna Wallace. Hart also uncovered texts between Jenna and Sophie in the days leading up to the murder, revealing escalating tensions between the two. Faced with irrefutable evidence, Jenna was brought back in for questioning. This time, her composure completely unraveled. She confessed to killing Sophie in a fit of rage after discovering the extent of her betrayals. Jenna described how she had confronted Sophie in their apartment that night, demanding an explanation for her manipulations and the harm she had caused. The argument quickly escalated into violence. In the heat of the moment, Jenna grabbed a knife from the kitchen and attacked Sophie. Jenna's confession was raw and emotional. She admitted that Sophie's betrayal had shattered her trust, and that years of suppressed anger and frustration had finally boiled over. Jenna claimed she hadn't intended to kill Sophie, but panicked after the fatal blow, staging the scene to look like a robbery in a desperate attempt to cover her tracks. Jenna's confession sent shockwaves through the courtroom. Alan, who had been on the brink of conviction, was cleared of all charges, though his reputation was irreparably damaged. Elena, grappling with the fallout of her false testimony and the exposure of her husband's affair, filed for divorce soon after the trial. The Calloway family was left in tatters, struggling to rebuild their lives amidst the lingering public scrutiny. Jenna's sentencing in November 2009 brought a bittersweet sense of closure. Sophie's murder had revealed a tangled web of lies, manipulations, and broken relationships. Detective Hart reflected on the case as one of the most complex of his career, a tragic reminder of how betrayal and obsession can destroy lives. The trial ended, but the scars it left on everyone involved would take years to heal. Alan, though acquitted, resigns from Vanguard Innovations amid the scandal, his reputation irreparably damaged. Elena files for divorce, seeking a fresh start. Detective Hart reflects on the case, noting how ambition and betrayal led to a tragedy that left no one unscathed. The story ends with a haunting reminder. Secrets, no matter how well kept, have a way of surfacing. And when they do, the cost can be deadly. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss our daily updates. If you enjoyed this case, you'll definitely want to check out the case about a special agent that got murdered. Let us know your thoughts in the comments.